It was 3 a.m. when the pounding started. Heavy boots against my front door, red and blue lights flashing through the blinds. They shouted, "HOA Enforcement!" But there's no such thing. My 12-year-old was the one who answered, thinking it was the police. What happened next changed everything. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood was awake, and the so-called HOA cop was on the ground in handcuffs. But the question everyone's still asking is, who sent him? And why us? For 10 quiet years, the McAllisters thought they had found peace. A modest home at the end of Willow Creek Lane, white porch, 2 oak trees, and a swing that creaked every evening as their son Ethan watched the sun go down. They weren't the loud type. No parties, no barking dogs, no drama. Just a small family trying to live quietly in a neighborhood that prided itself on order. That word, order, was painted on every mailbox, every community sign, and practically on the forehead of the HOA president, Gerald Pike. He ran the neighborhood like a private military base. Grass too long? Fine. Trash can left out overnight? Warning. Even the shade of your curtains had to be approved. The McAllisters never imagined they'd end up on his radar. Until the night they replaced their porch light, a small motion-activated bulb, bright enough to scare off raccoons. It was the kind of detail no one should notice. But Pike did. And he didn't just notice, he called it a violation. At first, they laughed it off. A silly rule, a harmless warning. But when the letters kept coming, louder, more aggressive, the laughter faded. Then came the unmarked car idling by their driveway, the photos taped to their mailbox, and the message slipped under their door. Comply or face enforcement. They didn't know what enforcement meant back then. They thought it was just HOA talk, paperwork, and fines. But in Willow Creek, enforcement had a whole new meaning, because just 3 weeks later, at 3 a.m., someone kicked in their door, and it wasn't the police. At first, the McAllisters tried to play by the rules. They replaced the porch light, filled out the correction compliance form, and mailed it back like good neighbors. But the next week, another notice arrived, this time about their mailbox. Too tall, it read, stamped in red. A few days later, it was the garden fence. Unauthorized modification. Each letter carried a fine. Each fine carried a threat. And each threat carried the same signature, Gerald Pike, HOA Enforcement Chair. Ethan started noticing things, too. A car was parked across the street, engine off, but the lights dimmed. A man in a reflective vest is taking pictures of their house in broad daylight. Sometimes the doorbell would ring at odd hours, but when they answered, no one was there. One evening, Sarah McAllister opened her mailbox to find something new. Not a letter, but photos, printed close-up shots of their windows, their son's bike, even their backyard. No note, just the HOA letterhead stamped on the corner. That night, she slept with the lights on. John McAllister decided enough was enough. He walked down to Pike's house, 3 doors away, to confront him. But Pike didn't answer. Instead, the next morning, an official complaint appeared in John's email, accusing him of harassment and disturbing the peace. The HOA called an emergency board meeting, one that the McAllisters weren't invited to. That's when things got darker. The family's security cameras started glitching. Footage erased, hard drives wiped. Then came the noise, a knock at 2 a.m., footsteps on gravel, the sound of metal scraping against their door handle. John called the police, but the officer just shrugged. HOA dispute, he said. Settle it internally. 3 days later, Ethan saw something that froze him in place. A man standing in their driveway wearing a dark vest labeled HOA Security, a fake badge clipped to his chest. When John stepped outside to question him, the man simply said, "Routine inspection," and walked away. But the HOA didn't have security. Sarah checked the community website. No such position existed. She sent Pike an email demanding answers. The response came 1 hour later. Your tone is inappropriate. Further non-compliance will result in enforcement measures. The next night, their power flickered. Their Wi-Fi went down. Then came a loud bang from the side of the house. John grabbed his flashlight and saw the security officer again, this time by their breaker box. When John shouted, the man bolted into the dark. By now, Ethan was terrified to sleep alone. They kept a baseball bat by the door, and John stayed awake most nights, watching the driveway through half-closed blinds. Then the final warning arrived. A plain envelope slipped under the door. No return address, no logo. Just 5 words typed in bold: Final enforcement, 3 a.m. John called the police again, but they said that without a direct threat, there was nothing they could do. So he did what any father would. He prepared. He checked every lock, charged every camera, and told Ethan that if anyone ever tried to come inside, to go to the closet and stay there. But Ethan didn't listen. Because when the pounding came 3 hours later, just as the clock hit 3 a.m., it was him who reached the door first. The sound was deafening, fists slamming against the door, the frame trembling like it might give at any second. "HOA Enforcement, open up!" A voice barked from the other side. John grabbed his phone, dialing 911. But the operator's voice was drowned out by the crash of splintering wood. The door flew open. A man in a black vest stormed inside. Flashlight blinding, a badge flashing that wasn't real. "Compliance inspection," he shouted, stepping into the living room. But what he didn't know was that the McAllisters were ready this time. John had left the hall lights off. Only the faint glow of the kitchen light filtered in. From the corner of the room, Ethan's voice cracked through the chaos. "Stop! My dad called the police." The fake officer spun toward the sound, and that's when he saw the boy. Ethan, small but steady, holding his late grandfather's hunting rifle. He didn't pull the trigger. He didn't have to. The sight of the gun froze the man where he stood. "Drop it!" John yelled, stepping forward, his phone's camera recording the entire scene. For a split second, no one moved. The tension hung like static in the air, until red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The real police arrived seconds later. The imposter was tackled to the floor, shouting about authorization and orders. But when the officers checked his ID, the truth shattered the neighborhood's illusion of order. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't security. He was the HOA's private contractor, a handyman Pike had paid under the table to enforce compliance. As they dragged him out, Gerald Pike stood at the edge of the driveway, bathrobe on, watching it all unfold. When the officer asked him a question, Pike just smiled and said, "We were just ensuring community safety." But the cameras caught it all. The vest, the fake badge, the fear in Ethan's eyes. And that's when John realized this wasn't about a porch light anymore. It was about control, and someone had finally pushed too far. By morning, Willow Creek Lane was buzzing. Patrol cars lined the street, news crews hovered at the gates, and every neighbor who once whispered about rules now whispered about Pike. The footage from John's phone had already spread, the fake badge, the break-in, the terrified voice of a child. There was no hiding it now. Within days, the HOA board held an emergency meeting, this time without Pike. He resigned before the police could knock on his door. Investigators later confirmed he'd hired multiple private enforcers, paying them from community funds to intimidate homeowners who didn't comply fast enough. Lawsuits followed, not just from the McAllisters, but from half the neighborhood. Fines were refunded, records opened, and for the first time in years, the people of Willow Creek realized they'd been living under fear, not order. The McAllisters eventually moved away, not because they lost, but because they'd had enough. Their story made headlines, and their video became a warning shared in HOA forums across the country. If your HOA acts like law enforcement, it's time to fight back. Ethan's courage became the heart of the story, a boy who stood his ground when adults failed to. The sheriff called it bravery. John called it a reminder that sometimes it takes the smallest voice to stop the biggest bullies. Months later, the HOA dissolved entirely. The gates came down, the rules disappeared, and the street, once silent and fearful, started to feel like a neighborhood again. Looking back, John often wondered how it all started. One porch light, one letter, one man obsessed with control. But maybe that's how it always begins, with something small, until someone finally says, enough. Moral: in a world obsessed with rules, Freedom sometimes costs the most to protect. What would you have done if someone broke into your home in the name of HOA enforcement? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more true HOA stories that prove one thing. Power doesn't always live behind the gate.